Our planet is a remarkable and beautiful place. Anthropogenic influence has been the primary cause of extinction in previous centuries, and is the predominant cause of species endangerment to this day. Human-induced climate change, as well as historic and current land clearing for urbanisation, has led to a loss of habitat and decreasing population numbers for native species. In Australia, we are fortunate enough to have a diverse array of species, including one of 3 biodiversity hotspots in the world. The chief strategy for managing threatened species in Australia is recovery planning. Recovery planning entails thorough research into the biology and ecology of a species, as well as common threatening processes that are causing species mortality, to provide targeted and effective management actions that must be implemented to reduce species mortality. Recovery plans have been written for hundreds of threatened species and ecological communities within Australia, and millions of dollars have been spent on threatened species. With this amount of money and time being spent on recovery plans, you would think there would be significant research into their efficacy, but in fact there has been little evaluation of the effectiveness of recovery plans. This short video will assess the effectiveness of current recovery planning and will attempt to provide recommendations to improve their effectiveness in stopping species decline. So what are the strengths and weaknesses of recovery planning? So the strengths of recovery planning are that they provide detailed insight into the life cycle of threatened species, as well as informing management actions for these species. They increase public awareness to the plight of threatened species. They can potentially restore stable population numbers of threatened species. And they can also be developed as multi-species recovery plans, which look at restoring species at a community scale. The weaknesses of recovery planning are that they are very expensive and time-consuming to produce, and they are currently only developed for half of the species on the threatened species list. Single species recovery plans do not look at processes at an ecological scale, therefore key threatening processes may be overlooked. Any efforts to restore the species may also be futile, as if the ecosystem is not healthy enough to support the species, then no amount of effort will help to restore a stable population. There is also a lack of quantitative criteria to assess recovery plan effectiveness. So are recovery plans effective? Although there isn't much literature reviewing the effectiveness of recovery planning, some studies have attempted to assess their effectiveness in conserving Australian species. Wesson et al. 2011 found that there are underrepresented taxonomic groups in the threatened species that have recovery plans written. They also found that recovery plans are not being written at a fast enough rate to keep up with the number of species being added to the threatened species list. There was also no detectable difference in likelihood of survival between threatened species with a recovery plan and those without. Similarly to this result, Bottrell et al. 2011 found that there was no significant difference in survivability between species with a recovery plan and those without. Finally, Taylor et al. 2011 found that a published recovery plan had no significant impact on the survival of threatened species. So as we can see, the overwhelming idea arising from this literature is that recovery plans are not being effective in their goals. So what is causing this? It may be an issue with funding, as conserving endangered species is expensive, and the amount of money being donated to these efforts is not sufficient for all threatened species. It may also be due to an inherent flaw with recovery plans, being that they are just a guideline. Just because a plan is published, it does not mean that everything that is written in it will be implemented. So how can we improve the effectiveness of recovery plans? We can continue to transition to a multi-species recovery plan approach, as they are much more cost and time effective, providing a better chance of publishing plans for all species on the threatened species list. We can also implement more consistent monitoring to ensure that management actions are implemented and all guidelines in the plan are carried out. We can also ensure that all taxonomic groups are fairly represented and not a majority of funding going towards charismatic vertebrate species. Recovery plans can be a viable conservation tool in the future, as long as there is continual monitoring and implementation of all actions within plans and an increased focus on larger scale conservation. Australia is an incredibly biodiverse place, and losing this biodiversity is something that we really do not want to do.